Good afternoon. Today I've entitled our study The Economy of God. You might wonder why I've chosen this title, but as I look around me in the world today and I see how that each country is trying to get its economy back on a strong footing. I think of the UK that withdrew from Europe with what we call Brexit, with the purpose of trying to stabilize its own financial situation. It was a country that had a very powerful ruling at one stage. It was actually said that the sun never set on the United Kingdom. We see how that America, with President Trump, is trying to stabilize the economy in his own country. It is the first time that they have such an incredible amount of unemployment. People are losing their homes. And there is the struggle to try and stabilize and bring America back to what it used to be, the land where promises and dreams could come true. In South Africa, where I live, the economy of South Africa has never been as bad as it is now. We see how that people are struggling to bring our financial situation back into a strong place. We see how that just recently we received a junk status, placing us in a way where other countries are almost scared to come to us. We seem to be in a place where our houses, our economy are in disarray. Today I want to read out of Daniel chapter 8, and I want to draw your attention again to verse 11. This little horn is doing something, and it says there, it set itself up to be as great as the Prince of Hosts. It took away the daily sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was brought low. So we see here immediately that this little horn attacks the sanctuary of God, his home, his governance, his kingdom. It says further, because of rebellion, the hosts of the saints and the daily sacrifice were given over to it. It prospered in everything it did, and truth was thrown to the ground. So we see that this little horn, because of the way in which we have been so bad at following God, because of our rebellion, this little horn is successful in getting us to question the economy of God, to question the way in which he governs the universe. A question is asked, is God really a God of love? This little horn has succeeded in getting us to question God's actions. If you read in Exodus 24, verse 8, God said to Moses, then have them make me a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell among them. So God wanted to clarify and get things straight. He says, build him a sanctuary. Build me a sanctuary on planet Earth, and I will come and dwell amongst you, and then by beholding you can decide if my governance or the way in which I operate my house is good or bad. It says further though in verse 9, make this tabernacle and all its furnishings exactly like the pattern I will show you. So God says, I don't want you to make something that you think my kingdom is like. I want you to make it exactly the way in which I operate and govern my kingdom. So Moses was told to carefully watch the way in which he was going to build God's dwelling place, the way in which he was going to promote God's kingdom. It's interesting that Jesus comes down and John the Baptist and the disciples say, the kingdom of God is here. It's saying that the way in which God governed the universe, the way in which God governs his kingdom has now been made available to mankind. But would you want to follow God's kingdom if his economy is bad? I mean, how many people in the world would like to come and stay in South Africa or invest in South Africa with our junk status? I don't think many. If what this little horn has said about the economy of God is true, then maybe we shouldn't want to go there. But is it true? We are told that he tramples on truth. In Hebrews chapter 8, verse 5, Paul writes this, They serve at a sanctuary that is a copy and shadow of what is in heaven. This is why Moses was warned when he was about to build the tabernacle. See to it that you make everything according to the pattern shown you on the mountain. So we see that Moses was instructed again to make sure that what he represented as God's kingdom was really a copy and a pattern of the one found in heaven. You know, dear friends, the sad part about it all is that the Jews who this economy was handed over to really portrayed the economy of God very badly. And that's why people did not choose to become Jewish. But I'm wondering now, we as Christians who claim to know the way of God, the way in which He operates, when we say that God is love, do we reveal that to others through our actions? I want you to notice something else. In Revelation chapter 11 verse 1, God actually encourages John to do something. He says to him in verse 1, I was given a reed like a measuring rod and was told, go and measure the temple of God and the altar and count the worshippers there. He's saying to John, I want you to come and look at me and study me and see if there is any wickedness in me. I want you to come and measure the way in which I operate, the way in which I govern my house. And if you can find fault with me, then you have a choice to make. But he says, I want you to look at the worshippers. Dear friends, that's you and I, who claim to be followers of God, who claim to be part of the economy of God. Does our house reflect what God's house is like? To close off, I want to go to Matthew, and I want to show you there in verse 7. God says something. Before you decide to judge me, or before you judge another country as to what they are like, listen to this. Do not judge, verse 1, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. I want you to understand that when we tend to look at peoples and criticize them and judge the way in which they operate their houses, we need to be very careful, because the judgment we are using, the measuring rods we are using to determine that, will be the measuring rods that will be used to determine our value, the way in which you operate our household. You see, God is so sure of His governance that He is a God of love, that He challenges us to measure His house. It says further, why do you look at the speck of the sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. You know, dear friends, this little horn challenged the economy of God. He challenged the way in which God governs His household. But I think that this little horn needs to get his house in order before he can do that.